So hello, everyone. We are continuing our series here, and we have Dr. Gordon Neufeld. He's the author of Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. Dr. Gordon Neufeld before he retired, had over 40 years of clinical experience as a developmental psychologist. He is a world-renowned best-selling author and international speaker, and he is the founder of the Neufeld Institute. And any of you who have worked with our courses know we reference his work in every course that we offer, and are often referring clients to his institute to take further courses because we just can't do his attachment paradigm justice. So welcome, Dr. Neufeld. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so the reason why Tanya and I with the Institute really love your work, and this book in particular, is it really addresses this shift in the idea of attachment in our teens. Like, I know we think of teens need to be just really acclimated to their peers, and we think that's completely normal for them just to be, pushing parents away and just be involved with their friends. And then we have all these problems with teens, and parents go, "What's happening?" And I feel like this book sheds light on what is going on, and you and Dr. Gabor Maté really delve into this. So what was the inspiration behind writing this book?
Wow.
That's a loaded question, Tammy. Okay.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, I'm a theorist, an old school theorist. So I build comprehensive models trying to bring all of the material together. And it was bringing in that comprehensive model, teaching developmental courses at University of British Columbia with all my students, and trying to put all the pieces together for them. And studying this material, that it suddenly realized that, oh my goodness, the whole key to that attachment is hierarchical. We're meant to be attached to those who take care of us, because the purpose of attachment is care. And that's how nature takes care of us, by getting us to take care of each other. But we don't take care of each other unless we're attached to each other. We're not receptive to care, nor do we have the power to care. So it's all about attachment. So attachment is nature's answer to survival. And so it was realizing this, and at the same time realizing that adolescence, it takes a long time to grow up these days. 200 years ago, we never even had this thing called adolescence, and now adolescence goes into the early 20s. We have a sophisticated society. So, oh my goodness, the implications of this is that the primary attachments need to be to the adults who are taking care of them, right through to their, to where they themselves marry and have children and so on. And then it goes on in cascading care, because now they need parents and grandparents and all of this. And so cascading care was the model. And people got confused professionally because of family systems theory. It initially gave a bad name to attachment theory, thinking that attachment was the enemy of individuation. And there was this idealization about adolescents that they were all becoming their own person, when in actual fact, this was not the reality. The reality is that they were becoming peer-oriented and less dependent upon adults. And it just felt like they were more independent. And that in reality, the orthogenetic principle, the meta principle of all development, is not that, is that inside the attachment with parents, because of the attachment with parents, in the womb of the attachment with parents, they become their own persons. So it was not either or, it was this and. And the healthy relationship is the adolescent who is struggling to have his own thoughts and ideas and his own boundaries, but within the context of attachment to parents and of being a separate person to his peers as well. So that was the revelation when all the pieces put together. And that's what said, oh my goodness, I gotta write this book. So
and I studied, my specialty was family systems in graduate school.
So you know the issue.
Yeah,
you know the problem. They eventually got it right, but the problem initially for the first almost 20 years, when family systems got out of the gate, they saw attachment as enmeshment, as fusion, it had all bad names instead, as codependence, and it had all bad names instead of understanding that it's everything. It is everything. It is the equivalent of survival. It never goes away. We are creatures of attachment.
And I tell people that when I'm teaching, I say, you know, we have attachments no matter every part of our society. And this is where I wanted you to speak to your hierarchical attachment paradigm, is that attachment doesn't go away when our children can walk and talk and go to school. We stay in that paradigm throughout our adulthood and in the different systems of life.
Always. And the hard part of when your own parents, before, you know, when you're, my own parents have died. And the most difficult part of that is not when the parent dies, but when that time when you are taking care of your parent and they no longer are in hierarchy over you, there is a kind of a silent grief that is hugely confusing, because there's always that meant to be that hierarchy where you feel cared for by someone, and it makes you more generous to take care of those in need, and so on and so on. And so the 5-year-old should be taking care of his 2-year-old sister, because the 5-year-old feels taken care of by, you know, mom and dad, who feel taken care of by so on and so on. And so this cascading care, and that is, people forget, but when Bowlby, who was the father of the term attachment, Aristotle was the father of the construct of attachment, and he mistakenly called it the social needs of humans, and he mistakenly saw it as pure. When Bowlby reinvented the term and said social, no, not social, attachment, the whole thing is this was for family. It made sense that we are attached to those who are responsible for our care. So it's adults, as teachers, as caregivers, but attachment is the delivery system of care. And if everything was as it should be, our children would never be placed in situations where they are taken care of by somebody that they are not attached to. If it was as it should be. Of course, we can't get...
But we can't always guarantee that. No, of course not.
No, we can't. But that's the way, ideally, it should work. There's so much power when care is rooted in attachment. Remember the song made popular by, what is it, the Hollies? He ain't heavy, he's my brother. Yeah. And it's why? Oh, the power when care is rooted in attachment. And that is meant to be there still for the parents of adolescents, and adolescents being receptive. Adolescents need grandparents. Oh, in the worst ways they do. And it's our job to connect those in the village. And that was the big mistake, thinking that adolescents need us, that they needed each other more than they needed those adults in their life.
And why don't you speak to, because I think the primary concept of this wonderful book is talks about pure orientation. And that, to me, when I've read this book a few times now, we talk about your hierarchy, which means you have someone, you know, looking up, and then you have the adult in a place of caring, and
Yes.
then the child looking up for care.
Yes.
And then something shifts when you have something called pure orientation. Can you speak to what kind of goes awry there, and how does that work? Versus a healthy teen, because it's not to say teens shouldn't have relationships with their peers.
No, not
but what is the difference? And maybe you can help.
The difference is around who you're orbiting around, who is what we would call the working attachment. In classical attachment theory, they called about the mother attachment or the primary attachment, but it's far more important to think of it as a working attachment. In a working attachment, like your marriage would be a working attachment. You get your bearings from it. You get a sense of home from it. This is a working attachment. Now, the thing here is that attachments are fickle, as we all know. They are incredibly fickle. They're fragile. They're fickle. They are irrational, non-logical. Who you fall in love with usually makes no sense whatsoever. And you try to put a bit of intelligence into it, but it doesn't really respond to this. Well, the reason that attachment was meant to be this replaceable is because of all the mortality rate. You never knew your mother was going to survive. Like this was, and so we were meant as human babies to be able to be taken care of by anybody we attach to. And so the story of Tarzan is even plausible and possible. And so, you know, because it would have empowered the Tarzan's mother to take care of Tarzan. So that is the backdrop The problem with this in our society, when children are prematurely separated from those who are meant to take care of them, the brain cannot stand the separation and looks around for somebody to be attached to. Well, in our society, children are put with peers and without having an attachment in common. This never was there. It never was there in hunter-gatherer tribes, in nomad times. Never was there. This is a new thing in terms of human history. So with peers being there, children start revolving around their peers, and the problem is they can't be around their peers and parents simultaneously. They don't have attachment in common, so it begins to replace. And in replacing them, the damage is done. When you are seeking proximity with your peers, revolving around them, you're pulled out of orbit from exactly the adults that are meant to take care of you, including your preschool teachers, including your daycare workers, your moms, dads, uncles, aunts, including your siblings, your family. And so you're pulled out of orbit. Now, we can have many attachments, and we're meant to have many attachments. Your spouse, your partner can have many attachments. None of that matters. You can be attached to a dog, a sports team, to golf. They're going to be attached to any of those things. But if any one of those attachments competes with the attachment to you, it's a competing attachment, and it's going to interfere with you taking care of each other. Now, the whole point of the parent-child relationship is to take care of them. When the child attaches in a competing attachment, now, they could have all the friends in the world as long as they don't pull them out of orbit from around the adults they need. When they are pulled out of orbit, and that's the tragedy of today's children, they're pulled out of orbit, and then you can't take care of them. And their peers aren't meant to take care of them.
And then they wound each other, which is a problem. And then you have those attachment injuries. And then the kids, I mean, we can't rely, you can't put two 5-year-olds together and then they use that other 5-year-old uses another 5-year-old as a compass point, and they constantly injure them.
Well, and that's it. And this is the point, is that we think they need to matter to each other. And there was this huge mistake in self-esteem research who said, well, they need to matter to each other. Well, the more they matter to each other, the more they can get hurt. We weren't meant to have that vulnerability. We were meant to be shielded by strong attachments to adults. So that's why the book is called Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. Because the more peers matter, the more a child is in trouble. And so they get wounded, the vulnerability is too great. And now we're beginning to understand the centrality of feelings. Feelings are the engine of maturation. Feelings are necessary to make us human and humane, fully human and humane. The result of becoming peer-oriented is that children lose their feelings. And so they venerate this place of being cool, not being affected. And we think that they're actually better off, mature, not so upset. And yet all of the signs of the emotional problems of loss of feelings, the aggression, the alarm, the anxiety, the adrenaline-based activity, the cutting, the burning, all of these things are escalating among children. And so, no, we adolescents need parents. They need parents, they need grandparents, they need uncles and aunts, they need a family.
Yeah, they need an adult to be their compass point. Like that's how you call it in the book, as someone to look up to follow direction from.
Yeah,
and
North Star. To get your bearings. They get their bearings. They should feel lost and homesick because you lose your bearings when you're not around those who take care of you. In today's situation with the pandemic, all the kids who were peer-oriented became homesick and lost because they weren't around their peers. Now, we should realize that children don't go to school to learn. How many of those are left in high school? They go to school to be around their peers, which tells you the problem is it's crippled education, and these kids aren't feeling taken care of. And then we have all of these escalations. Again, one of the greatest things that ever happened out of the pandemic, the silver lining, is many kids rediscovered their parents, and parents rediscovered their children, and it righted the relationships.
Right. We have a kiddo, just to be honest here, I have a 12-year-old who has really struggled with attachment, just to do such a trauma history. And I think the pandemic is one of the best things that ever happened for our relationship, because she now gets her bearings from us. We spend so much time together, and before she used to have anxiety about school, and now she doesn't feel anxious about going to school, because she goes, well, you guys are close by. And there's all of a sudden this shift we saw.
Yes.
And I always think when something like this happens, we have to look for the opportunities that exist. And I
Oh,
know a lot
yeah.
of families that rediscovered their kids during this pandemic. And I know that might be hard, maybe is not the case for everybody. And I know that, but I know a lot of families that have, like
Well,
the
that
simple
that
nature of the
that
relationship.
would have been the silver lining. That would hopefully correct peer orientation. Unfortunately, because of social media, unfortunately, because of all the ways of digital pursuit, some kids became totally preoccupied
Yeah.
and frenzied with, and it took them away from their families even more. And so, but this is, we're meant in this to be in this context of cascading care, and adolescents too. And that's what just seems to be big news for everybody. And even in all the considerations about going back to school after the pandemic, there are those who think, well, development would be a disaster if it wasn't for school. In actual fact, all the research has indicated that when you subtract school, but you preserve education, you preserve the family, you preserve this, that children do much better on every account. And so, yes, education is important, but when schools actually, when they become mediums perpetuating peer orientation, the end result is much worse because they lose their desire to learn, they lose their playfulness, they lose all the indicators of emotional health.
Yeah, because I mean, you go to school, we only want to learn from those whom we have an attachment with.
That's
We're only
right.
meant to
Yeah.
follow people we have an attachment with. So if a
Yeah.
child doesn't have a proper attachment with the teacher, or if the parent's the educator, they don't really learn anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah, they
important.
learn more in recess and lunch hour than in the
And the-
schoolroom, and that's because of who they're attached to. Because, again, the child gives birth to who their real parent is and who their real teachers are, of their attachment to them. So the tragedy is that many kids, true parents and teachers are peers who are never meant to have that responsibility.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think one of the most valuable lessons we can learn from your book is that parents think, kind of their work is done. They're teenagers, they're off with their friends, and to forget, like, there's a huge missed opportunity here and we have to remember that we're still as important as when they were little. That
Yes,
relationship is still
it
paramount.
is our developmental destiny to be their answer. And there's great dignity that comes from being able to be the answer to their needs to be taken care of and attachment. So there is a loss of fulfillment. The problem is when we don't find enough fulfillment in those places in family, we seek for it in other places and become peer oriented ourselves, instead of, again, embedding ourselves in this cascading care, which is the most significant factor in the emotional health and well-being of any individual and in society as a whole.
Yeah, and just not to forget, for our mental health as adults, to ensure that we have that care, that circle of care for ourselves. It's okay to
Yes.
be taken care of by somebody. That's important that we have that hierarchical
Yes,
relationship in our adult
it is.
relationship. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, learning to lean on each other in terms of
yeah,
partners and spouses is a whole nother story. But
yeah.
yes,
That vulnerability piece is always
that's right. That's exactly it.
messy.
Letting yourself actually be taken care of instead of being the one who orchestrates your own care. We have
Oh,
much to learn about attachment and care all the way through. But
yeah.
yes, that's
Well, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And again, like, just coming from as a clinician, thank you so much for the valuable work on attachment that you've done, because it has really shifted the way when I supervise clinicians, interns, and my own clinical work. Such a wonderful, and I know your former student and colleague, Dr. Deborah McNamara, spoke a lot about your attachment paradigm. So if any of you want to look and cite Dr. Gordon Neufeld's research is further cited in Deborah's interview on his attachment model, which we utilize at the Institute. So thank you for that paradigm, just from
a
the heart. It's
pleasure
wonderful.
to be here.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Gordon,
Okay,
and have a wonderful day.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.